So the Lord blessed him with a wife who has been faithful. He was faithful to all of his life. So our first invitation for a person to come and share, we're leaving off at age 13. Brother Bryce, would you like to come and share about Pastor Travis?
I think about my father, and I think I had a interesting perspective because, when you're the youngest of five, by the time you come along, you get to hear stories that you will never experience about your father, and then you start to build your own. And I remember, in the Johnson household, there's famous stories. And, I think about the story that my father tells, and it's a story, but it actually was a reality for him, about when he was driving the truck and Travis was in the car, and he was going down, and when I say truck, I mean like a diesel, and he was going down the mountain, and if he were alone, he probably would have jumped out of the truck. But because his son was in the car, in the truck, he stayed in the truck, and God blessed him to be able to turn the truck on two wheels. And this is like, I assume, was it loaded or not?
It was loaded and the brakes went out.
Yeah.
The brakes got hot. They were working, but they weren't working efficiently.
And so growing up, these were the stories that I heard when I first could start remembering stories of Daddy. And I remember other stories they used to tell about when they would go and work in LA, and Daddy would get the hot dogs and he would heat them up on the engine of the diesel, wrap them in foil and cook them or heat them up on there. And these were all stories that I thought were absolutely amazing, and they were not things that I experienced because I wasn't old enough to experience anything like that. And I kind of felt like all the fun kind of happened before I came along. And I remember as I got older that me and Daddy, we had our experiences as well. And they were different, and they were just as amazing. Every once in a while, people like to post things on Facebook and Instagram. And every once in a while when I go to Arco, I have to just go ahead and get a hot dog. Because Daddy would go and he would get a hot dog and he would put the relish and the mustard and the ketchup on it. And he would just make it look so good. And then later on in life, people was trying to tell me that hot dogs aren't healthy. I was like, well, the way my dad ate them, they gotta be healthy. But the point is that even now that I know about the health.
Well, these are the only ones I'll eat, the ones I
Sure, no, this is important. This is what I think is important about Daddy, is that it's not so much that the meal is the most healthiest meal that you could eat. At times, looking back, I think that might have been all that we could afford at the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't about if he could have another choice, he would get something different. He probably would if he had the money. But what is so important about Daddy is he was so humble that he would eat the hot dogs at Arco. And one thing I think is important is that growing up, so as it is now, every once in a while I definitely eat some hot dogs from Arco. Another thing that's very important is that he would always eat cookies and buttermilk. And I don't know if you've ever had buttermilk, like the real chocolate chip cookies and buttermilk. But for me, buttermilk is too bitter just to usually do much with other than cook with. But when you do actually mix them with chocolate chip cookies, it's actually kind of good and it's an acquired taste. So every once in a while, I'll have to get some cookies and buttermilk, and every once in a while I'll eat some hot dogs. And also, one other thing, if you know Daddy, he always loved grape soda. And so every once in a while I would get a grape soda as well. And when I do these things, it makes me remember about him, makes me remember how humble he was when it came to just the simple things in life. And I remember after my child was born, I had a greater respect for my father because I was so exhausted, and I'm still, in a way, exhausted from just having one child. I couldn't imagine that my father did that 5 times. And when I say that I'm exhausted, I don't want to put that all on me. I'm sure Melissa's more exhausted than I was, especially the first day that we met Trenton. But what's significant is I just remember the day after Trenton was born. Me and Melissa were so exhausted, and I'm sure Melissa was more exhausted than me. And I remember it was such a sad and interesting moment. The nurse came in and she checked on us. She like probably woke us up, and she said, have you changed Trenton's diaper? And we both looked at each other like, we're supposed to change his diaper. Now, we knew how to change his diaper, and we had done I would say Melissa knew how. I knew in theory how to change his diaper, and we went through training how to do this. But the point was, I was so exhausted. I didn't even think about that. He was sitting there. We were looking at him, kind of through sleepy eyes. But the point is that the work began at that moment. It was clear to me at this point, your job has just started. You know what I'm saying? Like, get to work. Now, Maya, I want to clarify. Melissa's job had started before that, okay? I think it's important to remember that, and I want to make sure that I say that. It wasn't just my job that started. Melissa's job started well before that in caring for him while he was in the womb. But when I look at that, and I think about sometimes when I'm tired, sometimes when I don't want to wake up and go to work, I think about my father having 5 children and working with metal, working with steel. Because, sometimes as a teacher, I'm not going to lie, it's not a physically taxing job. Sometimes it is, but it's nothing like working with steel. Now, emotionally it is, and other ways it absolutely is. But I don't really give myself much excuse to not show up for work. Because Daddy would go to work, whether he was sick, tired, or whatever the case may be, he would wake up and go to work. I remember it was a particular time, and I was in college, and I had written this. It might have been. I'm not exactly sure. It was like a 19-page paper, something insane. And I stayed up all night trying to write it. And the only car that we had was the starter had went out on it, and it was a stick shift. And so something happened with the cars, and I was only left with that car. And if I didn't get this paper turned in, which I stayed up all night on and worked several weeks on, I would get a 0 in the class. There was no questions. That's what it was. And so I stayed up all night, wrote the paper, and then me and Alilia push-started this car and got it going, and I drove the car all the way down to turn it in. Mind you, to Chafee. But if I would have stalled out, that would have been it. I wouldn't have been able to turn it in. That was it. Another thing that I was counting on is my father coming and getting me. I had no doubt that my father would come and help me start that car or tow the car, whatever it would be. And I know I work with students today that they don't even know their father, or their father definitely wouldn't do that. And I feel privileged every single day that I'm able to go into a job that I have a degree to get, because I wouldn't have been able to do that job. I wouldn't be able to get that job had he not supported me well before then. And so, as the story goes, I turned in the paper, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to start it again. So sure enough, I called my father, and he had to do everything he was already going to do, because I just, I didn't tell him the night before, like, you're going to have to come get me or anything. I had to call him and say, hey, I'm stranded. And, in normal daddy fashion, he starts asking me a few questions. If you say the car isn't working, okay, so what's wrong? And you tell him, okay, I did such and such, it's not working. Okay. What else? He asks me what else is such. I'm like, it's not going to start. It's whatever the case. And he's like, okay, I'll be down there. Now, so my father wasn't able to get down there probably till about 7 o'clock, and we worked on the car. I think I really don't know what we did. Like, if I know my father, he could have installed the starter there. I don't know what he did, but it took us a long time. And he got us back home, and the next day he went to work, regardless of what time he got back. And so that was an example that was lived before me, not just me, but all of us. And it's something that I carry with me no matter what job I'm working or who I'm working with. It is something that I definitely try to carry with me. And the last story that I'm going to share was a time where me and Daddy went to go and pray for someone who was very close to death. And I don't know how many of you guys have been in that situation. Maybe yourself, you're the person close to death, or if you've been in a room with someone close to death. But that's a very serious situation, and it feels different in the room. when someone is close to going to the other side, it feels different. And I was with him, and we were to pray for this person. And so we went in, and just like in normal daddy fashion, daddy asked a few questions, and then he began to pray. And he prayed. I remember listening to him, and I was so, the energy in the room was so intense that I could barely hold on to my father, who was next to me praying. And when he was done praying, it was implied that I would pray after that. But when I would go to pray, no words would come. When I would try to pray, it wasn't there. And my father kind of looked at me, but he didn't make a big deal about it or anything. And I believe he prayed a second time, and we left. And the significance of that particular interaction is that that person lived. In that moment, I didn't have the faith to pray for that person because I didn't believe that that person could be healed from that state. But my father did, and he was with me to go through that. And I hope if I'm ever blessed to be in that situation again, that I'll have the faith to realize that healing can come in that situation. Amen. And I feel blessed to have the opportunity to be around a man that is that noble. And what I mean by that is we don't get to choose who we're born to. We don't get to choose who is to take care of us before we have any say in it. And God thought it was appropriate and blessed and best for me to be with him, and I feel honored. I always make the joke, if my parents decided to have any less children, that would have been me. So I'm glad that they had as many as they did. I don't nip it off at the end, just keep me there. And I feel so blessed because I could have been in any family, and I feel that, also one last thing I know I said I was going to, I'm sorry for sharing so much. But I remember as a young child, when you're the youngest, when you're the smallest in the household, it's so important to have a father.
Yes.
It's so important to realize that there's someone else on your side that the big people will listen to. That the people that are taller than you, that are stronger than you, I knew like if Travis got out of hand, or if Aaron got out of hand, or if Lilia got out of hand, she was the one. She was the one that used to get me the most. That Daddy could come and take care of it. And he had my back. He would make sure, he said ding dong 25 times, it's time to stop. You know what I'm saying? And so that was so important.
Yeah, ding dong originated with me, but Daddy had the muscle.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. So, it's like, Mommy was the architect, but someone had to build it and keep it standing, right? So she just so if you guys don't know, so in our household, if you have 5 children, everyone's thought they want to wrestle or something like that. And if someone in the wrestling match felt like, they wanted to stop or tap out, if you will, if they said ding dong, the rule is that everyone has to stop. Like, the game's over. Instantly. And that was really important to me. Like, I got that rule perfect. Well, I abused it a little bit, but the point is I got the rule perfectly. And so the point is that I was designed, I felt, to protect me in that household. And so I just feel so thankful, so blessed. And I hope that I could be, half of a father that my father was to my child. Or if I'm half and he only have one, equals out. I'm joking. No, but but definitely, I just feel so blessed to share.
Thank the Lord.
Thank the Lord.
Right?
Thank you, Brett.
The hot dogs and stuff would probably help you way back.
Yeah, I was going to take some additional credit. He never said I got out of hand. So. But thank the Lord, I am thankful. So we left off with Pastor Travis at age 13. And when Pastor Travis was 14, you have any 14-year-olds here? All right. That was when Pastor Travis got his first job when he was 14, 15, and 16. And he went to the local grocery store and worked with the owner of the local grocery store. And his job was to sweep the walk in front of the grocery store where they had all the outside food and whatnot. And I forgot what he was paid. Grandpa, do you remember what Daddy was paid on his first job?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay, I don't remember either. But it was in Oklahoma. In what city did y'all live in? Do you remember what city you lived in Oklahoma?
Wichita.
In Oklahoma?
Uh-huh.
It was in Wichita.
Oh, did I say it the other way around? He was born in Oklahoma and they moved to Wichita.
Right.
Oh, yeah, because that's what, yeah. I said it backwards at the beginning.
You said it right then, you just said it back.
Oh, I did, okay. So it was in Wichita and there was an intersection. It was a number street and Green Street. So it was like 5th Street and Green Street. I don't remember the number exactly, or 15th, there was a 5. So at the corner of 5th and Green Street was an intersection, which was kind of like in the neighborhoods downtown area, and that's in that corner was the grocery store. In the grocery store, there was a hardware store and another store. There was a third store there, and so he would sweep the walk in front of all of the stores, but the man in front of the man who owned the grocery store was the one who paid him. And so every day after school, he'd go to the grocery store and he'd sweep. And then he would get paid, I believe, once a week for maintaining that. And that was, and when we think about it, all my siblings who are represented here, yeah, I was probably the beginning of the picking up trash. And so all of us growing up, everyone in our family, we do a lot of picking up trash. Oh, originated with you, okay. Pastor Mommy's claiming it. Always picking up trash.
How could I not play?
Well, thank the Lord for the example that he gave. So when he was 15, 16, he got his driver's license. Do we have any 15, 16-year-olds in here? Okay. And by the time he got his driver's license when he was 16 or 17, he talks about that same intersection. In Wichita, it snows. It snows, and there's ice on the street. He talks about the first time he wasn't gauging the ice right and slid through the intersection trying to stop on the ice. And he said that was the first time and that pretty much the only time he learned to drive well in the snow, very well. And 17 and 18, he was in high school, of course. 17, 18, we have any represented here? That's good, all right. So when Pastor Travis was 18 years old, he graduated from high school with the class of 1969. 1970? Okay, class of 1970 from Wichita High School in Wichita, Kansas. And when he turned 19, Grandpa, Grandma, Aunt Lavinia, Aunt Lucinda, and Pastor Travis, as we know him now, moved to California when he was 19 years old. Do we have any 19-year-olds here? Okay. 20 years old. Rewind. Before he graduated from high school, after he graduated from high school, before he moved to California at the end of age 19, he actually had purchased his first herd of cattle and was raising them to become a beef farmer. And he had what they call, it was 5 head, so he had 5, they're beef, cows, bovine. And he was storing them at his grandfather's farm. And his original plan was to become a beef farmer. And so he maintained those, and then once he moved to California, I believe he sold the beef, the cows. Angus, I think they were Angus cows. So he was planning to build a farm, and then he also, while he was in high school, he learned his trade, which was a welder. And when we talk about Daddy being a man of steel, he was very unusually strong, and for my observation and experience, they allowed me to go one time on the floor in the shop where they build at San Bernardino Still. At San Bernardino Still, they build high-rise buildings they construct the beams for high-rise buildings. And the one time I went to visit, I saw him and a partner flip a beam with their bare hands. They walked over, flipped it over. Now, the big I-beams that hold up the building, they don't, but the ones that make on the floor, they could flip it. So we are on age 20, who lived in California. So, Brother Aaron Johnson, would you like to share now?
I'm privileged to be the middle child of 5 extraordinary siblings. And I think my father was like, how do you find the story that makes sense for you, that makes sense for just the gift that he gave to myself? And one thing that popped up right now, I was just thinking about it, is it's probably even traumatizing, and maybe other people looking into the story, but for me it felt and made sense on how he thought about his congregation, how he thought about his family and those that he supported. And it was a situation where he came to me and he said, there's a situation where someone needs us to come and help and support them around 11 o'clock at night. So I recommend you go to sleep a little early, it's at 8 o'clock, so you can sleep until close to 11. We're gonna go over, we're gonna help them and their needs. And as the story unfolded itself, I remember him waking me up at 10 o'clock and we drove over to their house and we helped and supported them until about 30 minutes before he had to go to work. And so I drive him, now I'm tired, I'm ready to take a nap after working from 11 till I guess 4:30 is when he gets done. And I'm dropping him off and we're grabbing some water from the store. And he goes, all right, when I get back from work, I want these things done. Because I'm gonna meet you back at that spot to finish the job we had started. And so for me, what's really powerful about that idea is that I was exhausted and he was about to go work another 8 hours at work doing welding and working and still in a hostile emotional environment. And I was going back trying to grab a nap. I took a quick little nap and got back to work. And I worked for a little while and napped and rested during his 8-hour shift at work. Barely pick him up and get him back and we finished working all into the night. And what was important about that idea is that then he went to sleep and he got back and did work again. And I share that not just because, this is hard work, but he did it because he knew it needed to be done. And I did it because I knew if I said, you know what, I'm busy, I got some things to do, he would have did all that by himself. He would have not have. So I knew I needed to step in there and support to understand if they needed that help, he was going to deliver that help. And that was a theme on how he gave for his little congregation here. It might have maxed out 20 of us. But his sacrifice as a minister for his congregation and needed his help for the 11 o'clock at night until the wee hours of the morning, he would do that. And someone say, well, where is this? I talk to a lot of people nowadays and they go, well, how did he take care of himself? And how did he take it? I'm not sure how he did it. But he did all of that as a normal schedule and took care of all 5 of us and got us here. And so I think of how many people he fathered. It was well beyond the 5 children that he actually birthed and raised. And so I know sometimes it's hard for fathers to take care of the kids that they birthed and responsible for. And I think it's powerful to see someone that is a better father in his grave than some people that are still walking around being fathers. And that is powerful if you think about it. There are fathers that are still alive today that aren't as effective as my dad's been gone for 7 years. That his sons are still walking the straight and narrow, that we're still invested in the church, that we're still invested in each other, and that I don't have a conflict with any of my siblings. Alicia down to Bryce. Not one conflict with my siblings. That's because parents that invested in us. And I can't say that was me. I didn't do enough push-ups. I couldn't run enough miles. I couldn't do enough church without good parents that were godly glad to do that. So my dad was in the middle of that storm. And what's important about the story about what he did, this is one of probably many he did very similar to that, but he never would tell you. He never would brag about it. His humility was his brand. So a lot of things he did, we found out that he did at work, we didn't even know about until his coworkers told us what he did. He would never have told us what he did for them. And that's a model in which I have absorbed. And I know there are young people that he has maybe never met, the young people that know him, that are directly benefiting from him because of how he raised his children. And so I always tell young people I work with, that's like, I don't want to go to church. And I say, respect this church. Because the whole reason you're getting support from me is because I was raised correctly. And I was raised correctly because of the structure. Right? And so for me, I remember I went to Cal Arts and they said, why are you going to go back to the desert? Like, we're all going to LA. All my classmates went to LA. Why you go back to the desert to live and support, that little church? I had a gentleman sit down and told me, he said, what you don't want to do with all your talent there, you don't want to go to a small church. Go to a big church. A small church is going to drain you financially. He just gave me some advice. He was a pastor of a pretty large congregation. He's pretty wealthy himself. But what I know is that this church has never drained me financially, but it has inspired and kept me sane in my mind. Do I agree 100% with everything I hear? No, I have my own questions, but I'm not confused about where my blessings come from. I'm not confused about how I got through my college degree, how I got to where I am right now today. And so every young person that may know my father or not know them, that my father did an excellent job of giving to those quietly, humbly, and he gave the most to his family. A lot of times people give a lot to the world, that's all they give to. No, he gave his most to us. And I think it's one of the gifts he gave. So I just appreciate all of you all that came to celebrate. And those that may not know him directly, I appreciate you all. Because to me, Pie Sunday, every day on prayer meeting, or every Wednesday on prayer meeting, and Sunday service when I can and try and make it and support here in Los Angeles, that's part of my dad's legacy. And so it's so powerful. I will say quickly too, about Bryce's story about the hot dogs. I was one of those children that benefited from those amazing oil and gasoline marinated hot dogs. We liked the way they tasted. I don't think now in hindsight it was probably a lot of things happening in those hot dogs that we probably have questions about, but it speaks to how innovative he was. About he wanted some hot food, and with his huge hot engine, why waste all that energy? So I think his thinking's always in a good place of being creative. And I know they still exist somewhere, but he made these wheelbarrows, these like metal wheelbarrows for one of the ecology plants that was nearby that did old cars. And I would pay a pretty penny to get access to. He made like 16 of them. These amazing square, super strong, that last 1,000-year wheelbarrows he made. And he just made them, he designed them himself and put them all together himself. And they were brilliant. I remember getting in the pickup truck and put them in there and we're traveling out. I was probably like 10 years old or younger. We're at Fontana, so I probably was like 7. But just his craftsmanship, his creativity, he never called himself an artist. He never called himself a singer. He never called himself an extraordinary, out of the way kind of a man. But he was all those things. But what the beautiful part about it is he never would say it. He would just do it. I think that's what I'm going to take away is that I want to make sure that I'm not talking a lot. I want to be doing way more than that talking. That's a gift I got from my father, one of many. Thank you.
Thank the Lord. So Pastor Travis was 21, 22, anybody here? 23 years old when he got married. And before that, of course, he had to meet his wife, and that was we call Pastor Alice. And they met in church. She was living in Bakersfield, and he was living with his family in San Bernardino, and they would go around to the camp meetings, and they met each other. And they would participate in youth activities, and they saw each other. And as the story was told to me, I wasn't there, but as the story was told to me, he was interested in her, and she wasn't really all that interested in Travis. But him being a focused young man and persistent